You can't get quarters from bug bites. When I was in the Army, my unit had a training day one day where we did tactical movements in close quarters combat with paintball guns. It was pretty fun, except it was in Texas in the middle of summer in a training area full of tall grass that I ended up crawling around in a lot. I didn't notice any problems until a couple hours later when I was getting ready to head home and my legs started burning. I pulled my boots off and I rolled my pants up, and my feet and legs up to my mid-thigh were swollen and covered in hundreds of angry red welts. Apparently I'd crawled through a nest of chiggers, tiny biting bugs common in America that are apparently called trumbiculus officially, and they'd gone to town on my legs, bad enough to provoke an allergic reaction. I drive myself to the emergency room at the base hospital, and while I'm waiting to be seen, and feeling more and more terrible but needing to focus on something else, I started counting the bites. I stopped when I got to 100, and that was just on the inside of my right calf. The doc had never seen anything like it, and I ended up getting a massive dose of steroids, antibiotics, and inflammators, all hospital grade and with serious side effects of their own, as well as for days of quarters, the military equivalent of being told to stay home and don't come into work. My girlfriend came and picked me up from the hospital and drove me home, because at that point I was in no state to drive myself between the allergic reaction and the meds I was on to treat it. On the way home, I called my sergeant to let him know about my situation so he can get word up the chain of command. About an hour after that, I get a call from the first sergeant, the senior-most NCO in the unit herself. Now, she was one of the most incompetent first sergeants I ever worked with during my time in the Army, constantly making terrible decisions, mindlessly green-lighting whatever terrible decision our equally incompetent captain came up with, and micromanaging people unnecessarily. She tells me that my quarters has been revoked by the captain and that I have to come in the following day. I tell her that I'm holding orders in my hand from a doctor who's also a lieutenant colonel that I'm supposed to take time off to recover. She responds with, "You can't get quarters from bug bites," and rants at me that I'm just malingering and trying to get out of work. There was no way I could possibly seriously ill from just some bug bites. I tried to explain that I'd had an allergic reaction, but she wasn't having it, insisting I was a liar and a bad soldier because of it. I was to be at formation the next morning at 0900. Because of the extensive exercise we all got at the training event, they'd canceled PT for the day with my supposed quarter slip, and they would decide then if they were going to punish me more for trying to pull this stunt. Cue malicious compliance. Okay, I wore my PT uniform, a t-shirt and shorts, rather than our fatigues the next day, and had my girlfriend drive me in. I was still too messed up from the bites and meds to drive. I figured if I was going to get in trouble anyways, being in the wrong uniform would be the least of my worries. But my bare legs instead showed off the literal hundreds of now angrily red, almost purple or black in some cases, huge welts on my legs. The skin was more welt than not by the next morning. And I walked up showing off that rather horrific sight to my entire company of more than 100 enlisted NCOs and officers. Literally everyone who sees me is like, "Jesus fucking Christ. Quester SA, what the fuck happened to your legs?" It's clear to every single person in the company that I am actually legitimately having an allergic reaction just by sight alone. The first sergeant hears people making a ruckus, sees me, and turns bright red, knowing she fucked up when she hears me answering warrant officers, including my direct supervisor, asking, "Why are you here if you were that sick?" With first sergeant made me come in and told me that you can't get quarters because of bug bites. Within 10 minutes, I'd handed in a copy of my quarters slip, gotten a quiet and very private apology from the first sergeant, and was sent home for the next 4 days.
You want me to wear a see-thru shirt? Gladly. When I was 15, I started working for a particular clown who owns a fast food restaurant. When I first started working, the manager assumed I was 16, and I was given a red polo shirt to wear during my shifts. There was a hierarchy to the shirts at this restaurant. White was for anyone 15 and younger. You got a red shirt once you were 16 or over. Black shirts were for crew trainers, and the full button-down shirts were for managers. All of the shirts were made of a decent fabric except for the white shirt, which was very thin and practically see-through. About a month after I started working there, the manager called me into her office and asked why I had lied to her about my age. I told her I had never once said to her that I was only 15, so I never really lied about it. She told me I had to hand in my red shirt and exchange it for a white one, which I did. I wore the white one for about a week, and that's when I noticed, after the first wash, the fabric became even thinner and the shirt was practically see-through. As a heavy-set individual, if I were not wearing an undershirt, you would have seen all of my hairy manly glory underneath this sorry excuse for a shirt. Since I had already been wearing a red shirt for a month, and the shirt colors really don't mean much, could I get my old red shirt back? I was told that it was company policy to follow the shirt rules, and I was denied my old red shirt. Cue the MC. There was a rule stating I had to wear my see-through company-issued shirt for all my shifts. There was no rule stating what I had to wear underneath. My dad had recently returned from Mexico and had brought me the most touristy shirt from his trip. There were 4 panels on this shirt. The first had a worm and a shot that said 1 tequila. The second, the same worm, second shot, much drunker, and said 2 tequila. The third, the same worm, third shot, very drunk, and said 3 tequila. And as I'm sure you have deduced, the fourth is the worm passed out and it says floor. I decided this was the perfect undershirt for a 15-year-old register worker at the clown to wear underneath his see-through shirt. I wore it for 1 shift before the manager came up to me. She told me how much she didn't appreciate the fact that I wore such a vulgar shirt underneath my work uniform. I politely told her nobody know what I was wearing underneath my company-issued work shirt if they weren't see-through. When I went to clock out that day, they had a brand new and used red polo shirt just waiting for me. I was told to wear the red shirt from that point forward and to turn in my white shirts.
You asked for a secure fence, we gave you a secure fence. Our neighbors can be funny buggers. Nice 1 minute, moody the next. There was a rickety old fence between our properties, which I owned. We'd patched it up a few times, but didn't really have the money to totally replace 80 feet of bespoke-sized fences and posts at that time. The neighbors have complained a few times about our fence. They have 10 dogs and have spent a lot of money on landscaping their garden. They demanded we replace the fence because they need a secure boundary for the dogs, but made it very clear they were not contributing to the costs. It's not unreasonable, but the way they demanded rubbed me up the wrong way. Generally in the UK, there are no HOA rules on old builds, so I can replace the wooden fence with anything we like as long as it's on our land and is no more than 2 meters high. So last month we got a quote and arranged for a firm to replace the fencing. They informed the neighbors and picked a day they would be at work so not to ruin the surprise. When they got home, they found the wooden fence and wooden posts have been replaced with 6-foot concrete posts and a wall of concrete panels. Now they look out of their kitchen onto what resembles the Berlin Wall. Also made sure the smooth face of the concrete panels are pointing towards us. We have bushes along our side so wouldn't see it anyway, but their side is right next to their patio area. They haven't approached us about it yet, but my husband told me he could see the wife in her garden from his office window, and she had a face like thunder. Added for clarify, we got the materials cheap because hubby got a very competitive staff discount as part of contract for his new job. We couldn't afford it to replace the fencing until now. The neighbors have been nagging for years, but we have just been patching up the holes, so decided to finally get it done after one of her dogs got in my garden and wife ranted at me about it. Concrete fence was cheaper than bespoke fence sizes, but more expensive and less destructive on the gardens than standard fencing, as it would require repositioning the posts and having more holes dug for more posts.
Boss helps abusive employee accidentally fire herself. I originally posted this under Pro Revenge, but was told it would be better suited here. Here is the post. This isn't my personal story, but it happened to a friend at his company and I thought it was hilarious. The main characters are my friend Patrick M, then 26, Allie F, then about 29, and Boss M, older. Patrick and Allie worked at the same company in the same division under Boss. Allie was abusive to all the employees in the division, but especially to Patrick, because he was the newcomer and he was talented and he didn't suck up to her. Her bullying tactics included, but were not limited to, taking credit for other people's ideas, convincing Patrick that the others in the division didn't like him, attempting to ruin the careers of anyone who didn't suck up to her by preventing them from getting assigned to cool new projects, and last and worst, trying to get Patrick fired, which she almost succeeded in doing. He was so horrible to Patrick that his mental health suffered a decline. Everyone was vaguely aware of her behavior, but she had the worst part, so it was never quite obvious or bad enough to get her fired. Plus, she was also popular with the company's clients who didn't know, and she was a favorite of one of the top people at the company. Ellie seemed untouchable until several months after the Patrick almost gets fired incident, when the company started having a conversation about moving some of their employees to contract positions. Becoming a contractor would have its pros and cons. Contractors would pay for their own health insurance and would have no job security, being hired for individual contracts rather than a permanent employment position. But they would also be allowed to work for other companies. It was a great move for someone who was well known and wanted more visibility and options, but a lousy move for someone lower on the totem pole. Ali was somewhat of a narcissist who believed she was destined for greatness, waltzed into boss's office and told him she wanted to switch to a contractor position. She believed the company couldn't get by without her and would continue hiring her, while she also got to work for other companies and gain fame and visibility within the industry. Boss was all smiles and pretended to be supportive of her. This is a great career move. Think of all the options you'll have. As soon as the paperwork was signed, he never hired her for a single contract, and her future with the company, the best one in the city for this particular industry, was ruined. Ellie eventually found employment elsewhere, but it wasn't as good as the position she'd left. Patrick found out the second part of the story years later. He was under the impression, because of what Ellie had said and how people avoided him because they knew Ellie didn't like him, that no one was on his side and that his co-workers and boss had actually liked her. They hadn't. Turns out boss felt his hands were tied because she was a favorite of one of the top people at the company, but as soon as she gave him an out that allowed him to never have to work with her again, he took it.
Check out my other great videos.